Hello and welcome to another edition of Pastors Roundtable. We are just so excited that you are here on this Sabbath afternoon, this Saturday afternoon. I'm here with my host, co-host, Pastor Paul and Dr. Henry. We're just excited for this very special rendition, or actually edition, of the Pastors Roundtable. I don't know about you, but this has been a week, hasn't it, guys?
Oh, yes, it
Yes,
has.
it has, my brother.
Been a week. It's been a week. One of those weeks.
President
Wow.
said we could go back to church.
Yeah, but I heard a lot of our leaders are saying God is online, so we're gonna stay online for a while.
All
Come
right,
on.
all right, all
He
right.
has too much to say about two places he hasn't been.
Oh, watch it.
That is so true. That is so true. Well, listen, guys, we are just so excited to be here this week. We're talking about finances in the church. Dr. Henry, share with us what's on the table today.
Oh, we got a feast on the table today. I told you last week, you don't want to miss it. Today, we are talking about the financial impact of COVID-19 and the church. Again, the financial impact of COVID-19 and the church. And we are even going beyond COVID-19. I think COVID-19 just sets the platform to talk about how we can distribute the funds so that we can be efficient in ministry within our church.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, listen, there's a couple of things we want to share with you before we really get into the topic today and before we have a word of prayer. Listen, we at the Pastors Roundtable, we've created a couple of brand new things that we did not have last week that we want to make you aware of. There is the Pastors Roundtable Facebook page. Many of you have already friended that page, and you can watch that stream there. Some of you are watching it on my personal stream. I think our other host, Dr. Henry and Pastor Wade, will be sharing this stream to their pages. And we want you to share the stream as well, because we believe there's a whole lot of people who are going to want to hear a lot of this dialogue and conversation today. Not only that, there's also a Pastors Roundtable YouTube channel. And just shortly, we're going to post that on those pages too. So if you give us about 5-10 minutes and then visit any one of those pages, you'll be able to see the link to the Pastors Roundtable YouTube channel. Once you get there, we'd love for you to subscribe to that channel and then click the little bell so that you'll get a notice anytime we go live or add a video on there as well, so that you can follow with what's going on. There's also, Roger, did I understand we've got a Twitter account now? Is there a Twitter account?
Twitter will be up this week. Twitter
Okay,
will be up
Twitter
this.
and Instagram, something coming on
Yes.
Instagram. All right, so those platforms are coming because we want to be able to reach as many as we possibly can, and we want you to share it. Share it on your own timelines. Share the YouTube link once you see that up there so that you can participate. All right, let's bow our heads for a word of prayer, and then Dr. Henry is going to lead us in with our first question for the day. Let's pray. Father, we just commit this time into your hands. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Amen. Again, we're so happy to have our two guests on the show today. Pastor Joseph McCoy, former president of South Central Conference. You've had many accomplishments in your ministry, a fruitful ministry. You are never retired from the work. Praise the Lord. So we just thank you for sharing some time with us. And one of the accomplishments that you have done in your ministry, you were one of the principal agents for change, trying to make sure that our workers are taken care of. And that on top of evangelism, on top of being a leader in your conference. And so we just appreciate you being on this show. And then Pastor Vincent, again, a leader, what you have done in the church, in the denomination, building projects that you've had. You built, in fact, you've built some beautiful buildings by the grace of God. God has given you wisdom to do that and to raise money. And as an evangelist, baptizing thousands of souls. And so we just appreciate your wisdom. And again, like I said to Pastor McCoy, you are never retired from the work. And so we appreciate you being on this program today. We're talking about finances. And, when we started this show out, we put it on the platform that COVID-19 has given us the platform to evaluate what we are doing, what's efficient and what's not. And so with finances, because of COVID-19, there's a growing amount of people in our community, leaders, who believe that this pandemic will have long-term effects on the financial health of the church. So because of COVID-19 and because of the adjustments that have to be made in our society, it will have long-term effects. Now, for the church, we had financial obligations before COVID-19. We had mortgage payments, we had, evangelism funds that we had to raise to do evangelism. There were building repairs. Some people on this show right now, they may be a part of the church who were entering into a building project. And so we want to know from you, what are some of the suggestions that you can give, some tactical plans, short-term plans, long-term strategies, so that our churches can meet these financial demands even in this time? So any one of you can lead out. We'll, go with Dr. Vincent first. How should we do it? I mean, we have all these financial obligations. We got COVID-19, and now life has to go on. We still have to. Some churches want to be built. Some people, we got to pay the mortgage payments. How do we move? Give us a strategy. How do we make it through these times?
Well, my hope is that you're not interested in just a short-term strategy, but that you are interested in a long-term strategy, so that as we recover and recoup from COVID-19, that the church will continue to fulfill its mission by a distribution of funds that is directed towards the mission of the church. I believe that the present distribution of funds is driven by the structure of our church. And in order to reallocate the distribution of the funds, you have to first address changes in the structure. Now, our structure is like using a typewriter in a computer age, and the structure needs to be changed. Now, if you have a building, a structure that needs to be changed, you have a 50-story building that needs to come down, you can bring it down one out of two ways. You could either dynamite it and deal with all of the collateral damage, or you could bring it down brick by brick. Now, being conservative Adventist pastors, I think you are more concerned about bringing it down brick by brick. But if you want immediate results, you are going to have to dynamite. All right, so you have to make a commitment as to what you want to do about the structure in order to bring about the change.
Dr. Vincent, let me just share something right quick. I got to pull this back out. We did this a few weeks ago. Our audience will notice the colors of the name tags underneath of us. Pastor Wade's, his name tag color is red. Dr. Henry's name tag is in blue. That indicates the conservative and the progressive among us here. So brick by brick is Roger Wade. The bomb is Dr. Henry, and I'm fitting somewhere in the middle. Okay.
I may be more wall by wall, but not brick by brick.
Yeah, the only reason why Pastor Paul's in the middle is because he stood up the line. But can I just follow up? Okay, so again, you're talking about the structural change, and there'll definitely be room for that in this conversation. However, before that takes place, if it doesn't take place next month, what are some things that churches need to do? What are some things that leaders need to do so that we can make it next month? And I know we need to have a long-term plan, definitely. But what are the short-term things that we can do so that we can meet these financial obligations? And then, we'll definitely address that structural change that may be necessary at this time.
All right. You're addressing that to me, or you want Elder McCoy to?
Okay, well, I'll go to Pastor McCoy then. That's fine.
I'm looking for the dynamite, really. We keep trying to fix something in a way that it doesn't change anything. And we also put the study into the hands of people who've benefited by the way things run right now. So there's not going to be any great interest on the parts of leadership at any level that would want to materially change the structure. But now, I'll throw a couple of things out there. The church has too many organizational levels, and it has too many institutions. Particularly at the first one, I'll lob out there for your consumption, are the number of colleges and universities we have in the United States of America. We don't need that many. We don't have that many students. And each of them is struggling to survive, and they're marketing to the same group of people. So those are just a couple of the things that would have to be changed, really. And I just don't think that there's that. And I'll throw one more at you. When we come into the work, we are taught to aspire for upward mobility. It begins in a small church, and you're supposed to work to get to the next largest church and the next largest church. Then you go to the conference office, then you go to the union, then you go to the general, and then you go into retirement. So we are constantly moving away from where ministry is done. And we train our young people to want to be upwardly mobile, and then get mad with them when they want to be upwardly mobile. So
Wow.
there are just a lot of issues involved in this discussion. I'll rest my case.
Listen,
Okay,
I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and as a departmental union level departmental guy, I could feel a little way about this. I can get in my feelings, but yes, I'm very conservative. That's how I grew up. That's what I was taught. The missionaries did their job well when they got to Trinidad, and they taught my foreparents about this Christianity thing. But the question does have to be placed on the table with what we are facing with today. Even if COVID-19 didn't show up, there is definitely a call for change and a call for how we do with our finances. There's no doubt about it. But COVID-19 has put that urgency on it.
Yeah.
And now our churches are struggling because we are very conservative in how we move forward. So, Doc, you said dynamite. My goodness.
Yeah.
We already dynamite. Yeah, we already dynamite before we got to church, because society dynamites us and our psyche. And now church is not even there. And now what do we do? And now our finances are in issues. So what are some of the things out there that we can begin to do? And I want to also veil it with the fact that as I lead young people, I want to be able to help them. What are some of the things we need to think future when it comes to church and finances, or even individuals, because we are the church?
All right. Now, assuming that dynamite because of your conservatism is off of the table.
No, I
Because
didn't say it's off. I'm just
right,
saying.
right. Because if you dynamited, you would have to deal with the collateral damage.
Mm.
The alternative is to take it down brick by brick. But you will discover that if you attempt to do that, that the brethren will give you pushback with two words: further study, further study, further study. And they will further study your hips for the next 10 years, and you would be applying for retirement, and they will still be further studying your proposition. So in reality, you don't really have a choice if you are committed to change. Now, what does it look like if you are going to, as a local pastor now, address this? One of the things that I did was, and I'll tell you what I did, and then I'll tell you if I were pastoring today in your shoes, what I would do. One of the things that I did was to, since I understood that I could not beat the system, was to create alternative methods of funding outside of the denomination. And that's what I want to encourage a lot of you as younger pastors to do, because when you do that, you have an inflow of funds from what Ellen White describes as the wealth of the Gentiles. And since the brethren didn't generate this from the members within the congregation, they have absolutely no control with what you do with it. It is absolutely and discretionarily yours, so that you could put it to work in ways that you would like to do it. So that initially I would explore ways of alternative funding by trying to open up streams of income from the community by the principle that Ellen White describes as the wealth of the Gentiles. Now, that's what I did when we established the clinic here in Tampa, where we got our separate 501c, established a separate board, brought in community members, and we are able now to serve almost 2,000 people in our community through the nonprofit corporation, and the funds that we generate all come in through the community for ministry.
Okay, gentlemen, I want to make sure, if I can, that we didn't skip a step along here, because I know we've got a lot of people watching, and there was a question up on the screen I want to make sure that we address. But I think we've got a lot of people watching that may not, when we're talking about the financial structure of the church and we want to change it, they have no clue or no idea what it currently is. So, Elder McCoy, could you just spend maybe 60 seconds and just give us a quick little breakdown of what the financial structure of the church is, particularly as it pertains to tithe and offering? Where does the church get money from? Where does it go? What does it do?
Well, there are 5 organizational levels in the Seventh-day Adventist churches. The first is the local congregation. The second is the local conference, which oversees congregations. The third is the union, which I hesitate to say oversees conferences, but
my president would say, Elder Mark, I hate to break in, but my president would say, we serve the conferences.
Okay. The third level are the unions that are reputed to be the building blocks of the organization, But that's where the logjam is more than any place else, if you ask me. And then the union coordinates activities with conferences. Then the fourth level are the divisions, which coordinates activities of unions within specific territories, which includes nations. And then there's the general conference that coordinates activities with unions. What we fail to remember many times is the divisions are a unit of the general conference. So they are not a pure fourth level, if you ask me. All right. But those are the divisions, the levels of the church. And the money, all of the money that the church has comes from the local congregation. All of it. All right. And then the local congregations support the other levels of the church, and the other levels of the church do not feel a particular obligation to be visible at the local church, because conferences are dealing with local churches, but unions will tell you real fast they don't deal with churches; they deal with with conferences, and so they are removed from the membership. When you talk about the tithe dollar is collected at the local church, and it is sent to the local conference. 52% of which stays with the conference. 10.25% of that dollar goes into the retirement fund. 3% goes into education. 5% will go to a college or university. In our case, in the regional conferences, would be um, Oakwood. Then there is 10% that goes to the unions, and 20%, well, I think it's 16% now that goes to the general conference. But when you factor in what we call reversions, because a percentage of the money that's sent to unions and divisions and general conference are sent back to the local conferences, so that the local conferences of that tithe dollar will use 80% plus of the tithe dollar that is put in the offering plates on Sabbath. That's the.
So when we talk about
All right.
restructuring the finances of the church, we're talking about restructuring the percentages of where the percentages, how the percentages of those dollars, that tithe dollar is broken up. That's essentially what we're talking about.
That's what it sounds like to me. When
Okay.
you say adjust the percentages, that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay.
Well, let me, if I might interject, let me say parenthetically to Dr. Wade. He said that his president says that the union serves conferences. Everybody that serves me is beneath me. I don't know of anybody that on the plantation, um, the slaves did not run the plantation. They served at the master's privilege. So I don't know what type of service your union is doing to the conferences. But I do understand that when we talk about this type of structural change, that everybody gets territorial. If I were a local pastor today dealing with COVID, the very first thing that I would do is to, number one, send the tithe into the conference. I would pay my church insurance, and every other dime would stay in the local church. I don't think that it is fair to churches to require anything of them beyond sending the tithe in and taking care of the church insurance. In many conferences today, after you send the tithe in, there is a plethora of other streams that they want, from birthday thank offering, message, fall drives, in gathering, a lot of stuff. If I were pastoring the day, that's all the conference would get from me. Now, the second thing is that one avenue to change is that someone step outside and create a model on an experimental basis as to how some of this change can take place, to see how workable it is. Because I like to believe that it would take top to bottom experimentation in some areas to know what is workable and what is feasible. Um, to piggyback on what Elder McCoy says, I think he talked about the colleges and the universities. I would go a step further. I think that we need to even examine the viability of our church schools on the conference level, because in this conference, Southeastern, 90% of the students now are funded by Step Up. And if Step Up steps out or steps away or steps down, we are left in a quandary. And we now have become a charter school, a public school that teaches religion. And if all of the monies that we dump into Christian education on that level is going to educate community folk from the, we need to do a study as to whether or not that's viable for us, in terms, if that was that the original mission of Christian education, or was Christian education designed for our kids, which it is not fulfilling its mission and its purpose at present. Now, if you follow what Elder McCoy just said, that I'd like to expand upon, that would mean that you would need to get rid of certain levels of the organization, which will be the union. And I have said that 90 days as a conference secretary has convinced me beyond the shadow of any human type of doubt that the average conference, if they had the gall and the gumption could do it, can operate a president, a treasurer, a secretary, somebody in human resources, and one somebody in there to handle the ministries. Everybody else in that conference office can take a church. As a result of the pandemic, if we are going to utilize Zoom and what we are doing now, there is no longer a need for departmental men in our churches. Um, that money can go into hiring more pastors and into the mission of the church. Because when you reduce your departmental guys, you reduce the secretaries, you reduce those salaries, you reduce all of the monies that you have to pay for their subsidies in Christian educations at Oakwood, or the travel and all of that. That's where all of the money is tied up. That's the money is there. We just need to find a way to make it work for us. And then when we identify it, then it needs to come back, not go up, but come back into the local church where it is designed for ministry and mission.
But gentlemen, I hear what you're saying. I couldn't stay quiet too long.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying. It makes sense. But the way I see it, and the way I'm seeing it now, is that at the union level, we do serve the conferences in light of their mission and what they must do in their region. We serve them in whatever way we can, and helping coordinating what helps them coordinate across a union territory, because you can't be in the trenches and know what's going on in the next yard because you're dealing with what you're doing. So what we help with at the union level is to help smooth that over, connect that, make it happen. And then I have to say that even in the union that I'm in, it's very small. It's not doesn't ha- I'm over you all the ministries. I'm carrying all. I don't even do all the ministries. So there is not a sense of a lot of funding at the level that I'm at. That money goes way right back to the conference. I think the key thing as a member sitting in the pew, a lot of people feel that all this money is going up, but based on what Elder McCoy shared, it's about 80% that comes back down. And most of that money is spent at the conference level, where you're paying pastors, you're paying things there at the conference level, doing things at the conference level, but yet still we're advocating that the money is not getting to the local church. So somewhere, somebody's got to help me understand, what do we really want? Do we want the funding to stay at the local church, which changes the type of church we are? Or are we saying the way we are in how we fund going up to come back down does make levels the playing field for every church to have a pastor, to have other things in terms of buildings and corporate stuff. We know there are those things that we're not sharing with our members, in understanding that it's not just what I give in the plate. Because if it was just based on what I gave in the plate, a lot of our churches should close. But they are open because of the way we fund our churches.
Well, now I can react to the union, brethren, in terms of myself as a pastor. And maybe one of the things I want to interject is, as you guys move along on this path towards change, is that you develop certain instruments by which you can survey pastors. And you send a survey to the pastors and ask them, if they took the union out of the equation, will you miss the union? And see how many pastors will make the statement that would justify what Pastor Wade says. Because they would answer that based upon how the union impacts me as a pastor in the local congregation. The pastors in the conference office don't impact the local pastors as they should, much less the union guys. And what this restructuring will do is that it will centralize all of the resources and the expertise in the North American division, so that when it comes to, say, a Sabbath school director, what does a Sabbath school director do between Monday and Friday? There's no Sabbath school. There is nothing for him to do. Then on Sabbath, he can train through Zoom every single teacher, every single officer, right from the North American Division office, Saturday evening and Sunday morning. There is no need in the 21st century for all of these brethren to be sitting up in an office. If you have 150 churches, they can get about 25 or 30 a year. So you have to move away from that structure and that pattern to where it is centralized resources. And as you do that, you will free more and more resources. It's not just your salary, it's your travel, it's your benefits, it's your secretary, it's your secretary's benefits, it's her retirement, it's the 3 kids she got in college that the organization subsidizes. That is where all of the money is that we need to identify and put back into the local church.
You see, I don't believe that, and I'm not going to belabor the point. I think we have a perception that it's that way, but you and I both know our pay is not at the level it should be for the amount of work a local pastor does. But we do it before the love of the calling that God has placed in our life. There is money sitting in the pews. We all know that. But we have to understand we pastor people. And when we pastor people, for the monies to stay in the local church, it needs to stay in the offering, but we only push a tithe given. We don't push offering given. And that's another discussion. But again, I think we're asking for structure change, and what we really want is priorities.
Right.
Because what you shared is a priority adjustment and not a structure change. Doctor,
Right, and what I'm hearing, Pastor Wade and Dr. Vincent, is more. It seems like you want to shift to a congregational style of governance, where just everything happens at the local church, where there's no need for a local conference, there's no need for a union, there's no. I mean, if the local church keeps everything, then there are no levels. It's just the local church running with those funds there, and if that's so, what keeps us together as a denomination? Australia, I believe it's the governance there in Australia, they're now going through, they're trying to go through a structural change where they have town hall meetings and so forth, trying to figure out what would be best to do mission. So again, coming back to the point here, next month, we hope that by next month or in 2 months in some parts of the country, that we're going to be back in our church. That's what we hope. Some people are trying to go in a little earlier. Some people, I heard, late as September. How do we, as leaders right now, I mean, do we throw the dynamite right now and say, let's keep all the money now? Or what do we do now? How can we survive now? You all have been through the trenches. You know about organizational change and how to raise money and how to meet mission. You've proven that in your ministry. So what do we do?
Dr. Henry, if I can, there was a comment in the chat that I wanted to highlight that kind of would speak to, if we were to try to throw that dynamite into the mix now. Brad Forbes says this. He says unions are an important part, of our representation at the General Conference. If we consider removing the unions, we need to start with changing how the General Conference chooses its representatives. So if we're talking about wanting to change something now, it's not just a little tweak. This point brings out the idea that one thing begets another thing. It's like a chain reaction that goes and impacts not just finances, but it would also impact structure. So that brings us back to Pastor Vincent's or Dr. Vincent's thing of, is it brick by brick or is it the explosion? If we do the explosion, then what happens to pieces of the structure like this as opposed to the brick by brick?
Well,
I'm sorry.
Right. I would just, and I'll yield to you in a minute. I just wanted to respond to what Anselm said, Pastor Paul. If you're talking about change and you're serious about change, you have to be transparent enough to bring an unbiased, unprejudiced, selfless approach that is not territorial and not provincial. A lot of stuff that I'm hearing, like from Pastor Witt, these are premises that are untried, that we don't know. It's like me defending the existence of the typewriter when there is a computer waiting to be invented. But I will never get to the invention of the computer if I keep on thinking that the typewriter is the only thing that can service me for my particular needs and purpose. When you close your mind even to the possibility of exploring, a pilot to think how this change can come, it will never happen. And it's not working for us now. And as long as we keep pushing back and we keep on with the same structure, we'll keep on getting the same results.
Well, there's another part that we haven't talked about yet, and that is, especially with our younger members over the last 15 or 20 years, the sense of commitment to mission and sacrifice is not there, and it's not their fault. It's our fault for not teaching that to them. Mm-hmm. Okay? or modeling that for them. Black people in the United States in the Seventh-day Adventist Church have more money than we've ever had in the history of our church.
Mm.
And we can't fund our schools. We can't send our kids to church school or to any of our academies because we say it's too expensive. When I talk to some of our young people, I'll tell them, well, don't go to Vail to ski twice a year. Go once, you know, so that you're talking about a commitment to the mission. We haven't done that. If you don't have AY programs where kids are coming to church every Sabbath afternoon and coming under the influence of what the church does when it's not at 11 o'clock worship, if they're not in our church school systems or anything like that, when the perception also is that our church schools are a second-rate educational institution, when all of those perceptions are out there and we're doing nothing about it, then that is one of the main reasons why we are where we are. Now, I'll say one thing about the C-19 crisis that we are in. That crisis, the crisis of finances existed long before we got here to C-19.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because we have separated ourselves from the kind of visitation programs in our churches that call our members to personal responsibility. You want to use modern technology, you don't even have to go to the member's house now. You can talk to them on FaceTime, Skype, Instagram, Twitter. You can communicate with them through all of these methods that are at our disposal now, but we're not using any of those to get to our members. And if you talk about departmental people, they don't do any training. They come in, preach on Sabbath, have dinner, go home. What happened to the workshops that would go on Sabbath afternoon or during the course of the week? We have stopped doing all of those things over the last 15, 20, 30 years, whatever it is. And that's why we are where we are now. So I'm willing to talk about structural change, but let's look at everything because there is no one thing that is going to settle this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree with Ella McCoy, and part of the challenge is to deal with the millennial mindset. And those of you who have been close to the millennials will know that they put their money where they can see some results from their money. Before retiring, some of the professionals in my church would reverse the tithes and offerings. They would put their tithe in the local church and send the offerings into the conference because they wanted to see where their money was being impacted, because they felt like the system, was a game where when the brethren laid their hands on the money in the conference, they did with it everything they told the local church you can't do with it. You can't pay a janitor for the local church with it, but the janitor in the conference office gets paid with it. You can't pay a secretary for your pastor with it, but the secretary in the conference office gets paid with it. You can pay your light bill in your church with it, but the light bill in the conference office, gets paid with it. And it's that type of what they deemed to be hypocrisy that they could not actually deal with, because as they look around, there were so many needs in the community. And part of the problem with our church is that we have a worldview that does not begin in Jerusalem or in the community. That's where ministry ought to, before you get to the world, you have to start in Jerusalem. We had bypassed Jerusalem completely and gone to Africa, and we've gone to Asia and everything. And Jerusalem is crying out for so many needs. We have we don't address addictions, homelessness, none of the needs in our communities. And that is why evangelism is a crisis among our churches today, because the old mores and customs of the black people getting into tents at the end of the day has vanished. And we can't get them to come out to our evangelistic meetings anymore. And we are out of answers evangelistically. And since we don't meet the needs of people in our community, like Ellen White says, we can't draw anybody to our churches. So our average church closed down. It closes down at 1:30 or 2 o'clock on Sabbath afternoon. It opens on Wednesday night, and you don't see any activity in that parking lot until 8:30 again next Sabbath morning.
My Lord.
And none of the resources of our churches are going into the community. And unless that happens, our church now is on life support. We will take it to the cemetery, and we will perform the final rites if we don't turn this around.
This conservative needs to ask this question then. Whose fault is that? If the money is coming in at the local church before it goes up to the conference, whose fault is it that the money that comes in is not being revitalized and reinvested in the community? Do we now, just because we get the money, now wait for the conference to send it back down so then we can meet the community needs? I think it starts with us in the pew.
But when you have a bureaucratic form of church governance.
But if the local church is the key to this whole structure, and all the local churches in the now, let me be honest with you. I pastored in a conference where there were 5 churches within a 3-block area, and every church was doing their own thing. Could we not have come together? And sometimes we blame the conference, the union, the GC, when it's really at the local level that we are not really calling an accountability to, where these funds and the mission is being utilized. I'm seeing it from both ends. I was down there, and I'm up here now. But I am seeing where there is a responsibility that our local churches have in utilizing the funds that they get and reinvesting it back into the community, along with being faithful to what God has asked them to do.
Your last statement really epitomizes it. You said, I was down there.
You're kind of laid it out that way. And I'm at the top. I don't know about all that.
Not only that, the problem with the structure is that I have a responsibility. But my responsibility is to follow the policies and guidelines that have been handed down to me by the bureaucracy, in which I had no participation in terms of the formation of these policies. The member who gives these funds have no say-so in the percentages or anything. All he is educated to do is to put that money in that plate and let it go. And as pastors, we are supposed to be good company men. We are taught that if you are selling Coca-Cola, you can't advertise Pepsi, and you better be loyal to the Coca-Cola company. Else, if you start knocking holes in the boat, you can't knock holes in the boat and be a sailor on it at the same time. And the brethren, under threat of the old presidents, would want to put you out to work if you don't line up with the structure. So we have come along in eras where we have been good company men. But looking back on it now, we understand that it has not worked for our churches. And this is what this crisis has done. It has presented us with an opportunity to change. And you, brethren, can either embrace it or leave it to continue to go back to the way that it used to be.
Well, I'm gonna tell you this: the people who should be worried least about whether they're gonna get paid next month are church pastors.
And teachers.
Okay, and no, church pastors, um, because
Teacher.
you are where the money is generated. You know, and I'm not talking about a 30-member church or a 12-member church. Okay, but I mean, if you're in an urban area, the income of your church, the tithe dollar is far more than your salary. Okay, and the people who ought to be worried are the people who are in departmental and leadership positions because they have to wait for that money to come from you. All right. So my point is that we have to deal with, you can't, you got to fight many fronts. You got to tackle this issue with more than a one-word answer. And right now, I told the brethren last night, one of my favorite quotes is, a crisis is an opportunity riding the dangerous wind. What C-19 is telling us is, you don't necessarily have to come to church to get money,
Mm-hmm.
because there are all kinds of electronic ways to get money. But you have to, at least, even if it is through technology, you still have to minister to your members.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's easy for me to say because I'm way past my experience as a pastor. And once when Adventist preachers get old, suddenly we have all of the answers. But this is not rocket science. You can see that, right? And everybody is not losing money at this point.
Right.
As soon as the crisis hit, and I'll tell you right now, folk were saying to me, should we not allow the conferences to reduce their percentages to the retirement plan during this crisis? And I said, no. This is the third week in March. We don't even know what's going to happen. Let's wait and see what the reports will show. All right. I was on a conference call this week where one particular conference has a substantial tithe gain. All right. So I'm saying let's wait and see let's see what's going to happen. The opportunity is to get on the phone or Facebook or all of these other methods of communication and talk to the membership about what's there. And you will discover, all of us know this, only about 20 to 30% of our members are faithful anyway.
Wow. Okay. And
That
we haven't even reached that issue yet, and that's a big thing there. But I know that our guest, Dr. Vincent and Pastor McCoy, you guys cannot see the social media chat on the Skype window, but there's been a whole lot of chat and engagement, and I wanted to bring up something that I saw.
Can I just interject one little brief point in
Sure,
relationship to what Elder McCoy just said?
Okay.
He said that in terms of worry, that the persons that should worry least in this pandemic are local pastors like you, because the money comes through you before it goes up. To make that work for you, you will have to take out a stick of dynamite, right? Because the allow you to do that. And where I differ with Elder McCoy is that the person that needs to be worried most, according to the system, is the local pastor. Because we know if the system works as it is now, and reduction needs to be take place, you know what the first thing the brethren does? The local pastors are the ones that are cut off. They combine districts, and the union men, all of these brethren are the secure ones by seniority of position and level, and they will be the least impacted by the virus. so that he is right in that you take that stick of dynamite first and you protect yourself, make sure that you get paid before that money goes up there, because you are the most vulnerable in the present system and structure that we have right now.
My Lord, you need to get a blue tag on your name.
He, yeah, he
So,
went.
Hey,
so
y'all invited me on. I didn't ask to come
we
on. Y'all
understand.
invited me on.
if I
Listen,
know,
Passed away. I'm going to join your side, passed away.
all right. Listen, I wanted to
I
go
know
back
Patrick
to.
All right.
Benson.
Yes, go ahead.
I wanted to
If
go
I
back.
know,
Pass
if
it,
I
pass it,
know,
McCoy.
if I know one Patrick Benson and the kind of pastor he has been, which is just 2 degrees short of renegade, he would not be worried about his salary if he were pastoring that church in Tampa. He wouldn't be worried about it. Okay, and to talk about
The conservatives will.
yeah, you
Uh, uh,
and but you're right. You're right that when they start cutting pastors, consolidating districts, and all. That's what the bureaucracy does. But there is such a thing as when the membership has information, they will make the proper decisions under good leadership.
Mhm.
Right.
Okay, so this is I want to go back to something again. I know you guys. I guess you guys can't see the chat, but I've been watching a little conversation that was happening earlier between Brad Forbes, who you know is at what's the thing Brad does, Advent
Advanced
Source,
source.
Advent
Yes.
Source.
and Dr. Leslie Pollard. And Dr. Pollard brought up a question about the existence of the unions and why they were formed. And he posited that questions. I think it was somewhere around the turn of the century, or not this one, the previous one. And he was asking, could we talk about the reason why the unions were formed in the first place? Because he suggested that there was a time when the Adventist Church operated as a unionless organization. I'm not sure if either of you have any information about that. But then following up, I want to see if I can tie a couple of things together here. There was another post that mentioned, said something about the transparency of what's going on or what happens with our finances. And I'm going to push an envelope here. There's a whole lot of our structure in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, from the local church to the local conference to the division to almost every level, I would imagine, because some of them I haven't really seen, but where there is very little transparency. There are some churches where the churches have no clue how money is being spent in the local church. There are some conferences where not only the constituency has no idea what's going on or how money is spent, but even local pastors have no idea, or all they have is an idea. How do we speak to these issues about structure? Because there are people who don't know the answer to that question. Why were unions formed in the first place? And if there was some transparency and a more direct route to gather information, then perhaps our members would be in a better place to have an opinion. A lot of people have opinions on stuff they don't know anything about, and that's not. Is that their fault, or does the fault lie somewhere else?
Well, first of all, I would say that I don't know about the historical formation of the unions, not enough to speak to it. But what I do not want to hear is that has anything to do with its removal. The only consideration is it fulfilling its present purpose? I don't have to know about the history of the invention of a typewriter to know that the typewriter is not working for me anymore. The crucial question is this tool efficient and effective? Regardless as to its history, it has nothing to do with it. The Wright brothers, we can go if they did not challenge aviation at that time, we won't have supersonic jets. We have to move past where we are in terms of whether or not this tool is efficient for us. So I can't speak to the history and the origin of the union, but what I know is that it's not working for us anymore.
Should a local pastor, or I'm sorry, a member, should a member of a local conference, layperson, pastor, should they be able to see the conference budget?
Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Elder McCoy has been a president, and he can speak to this uh, more readily than I did. But understand part of what the structure breeds, right? The structure breeds a system in which the local member in the pew comes to a constituency meeting, and at the end of the meeting, mortgages all of his rights and duties and privileges over to the president and a committee of about 30 people for the next 4 years. And they are trained that these folk will operate the conference for you, and they will give you a report 4 years down the road at the constituency meeting. And the members from that point are detached. And the only way they know what's going on is what leaks out of the committee, or if somebody that they're connected to give them a report. And somewhere in the structure, that has to change with the technological opening up of the technological highway. There has to be the filling in of a gap where at least the president gives a state of the union address, state of the conference address by Zoom to all of the conference constituency meeting on a given Sabbath once a quarter, where everybody in all of the churches could sit down and listen, and the finances at every quarter in the churches where the people can see the auditive statement. All of that is missing from our conference.
But
Everything is in a secret society once you leave the constituency meeting. And
I want,
that's
I want,
that's part of the reason for that, Pastor Wade.
but I want to say this. I want to say this. Over the past 10 to 15 years since I have been pastoring in the organized church, there has been a change. There are conferences who do demand, even written in their constitution, to have mid-year or mid-term town hall meetings where they're requiring their leadership to report back to what's happening. I think it's changing. The problem is it may not be changing fast enough, or maybe it's not changing in a way that's being mandated that it needs to change. And now I've heard a group of pastors share that the reason some of our churches are in the issues that they're in is because the problem is the leadership of the church are left to guys, or to people, I should say, women, men and women, who are taught how to parse scripture and not how to lead organizations.
Ooh, my.
Wow.
I
Yeah,
think
well,
we go to school and we learn how to do Hebrew and Greek. We spend
Well,
a lot of time in learning Hebrew and Greek and what the minor prophets say, but we really don't spend much time on how to organize, how to move, how to develop, how to project, how to plan. Those are some things we catch as we go along, or we have a mentor, or we listen to leaders who were before us, who learned by trial and error. And now we are saying the church is in this, but we have not empowered some of the leaders we have in our churches to help move our church forward. And I think that needs to be said somewhere. But again, all I'm saying is that everyone's talking about change and structure change, get rid of the union. But what I'm hearing is we need to change our priorities as opposed to changing our structure.
well, if I may, all of this talk, um, we'll be here another hour and, and we won't have solved anything. I'm going to tell you right now, 'cause, you know, we have a mentor. I always say this. 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 I alwa The policies and practices of the Seventh-day Adventist Church are not sacred. They just are not sacred. All right. The organizational structure is not sacred, and it can be changed. I'm going to tell you something else. If you look at income disparities between Black Americans and white Americans, where the average Black American household earns about 69 cents out of the dollar that whites earn. And yet, within the Seventh day Adventist Church, we are trying to live by policies and practices that have been developed by people that are not Black. And we don't take in the income disparities reality when you start talking about how the church is funded. The other thing is, we have lost a significant percentage of our financial and intellectual wealth to non-Black churches in recent times. Our people are leaving our organizations chasing the bubble of integration and unity and all that other pablum that's trotted out there. And it's hurting our organizations that stay by the structure as it relates to regional conferences. We don't want to talk about that, but whether it's brick by brick or dynamite, that needs to change. And as I go around this country, listening to people make comments, there's a lot of awfulizing about it, but I have yet to see a structured program to deal with those realities.
Um,
All right, and
let,
if I can,
let me
if
just
I can,
let me just say something here before you go, Pastor Vincent. Um, we've talked, for the last hour and so about some changes that need to be made in our structure, right? The dynamite approach, the brick by brick. We've talked about those things. So I want to know here now, what hope do we have as a church? Because we recognize that there are things that need to be changed. So, what hope can you give the person in the pew that is listening to this show and they're understanding all of these things about the church is not, we're not retaining the funds that we need for evangelism. They're learning that we've heard that some of the institutions, we might not need all the institutions that we have. And then we heard a little bit about maybe we need to move towards a congregational style of governance. What hope do we have as members of the Adventist Church, because remember, the point is our job is to fulfill mission. We have been commissioned to fulfill mission. So what hope do we have as a church as we look forward to the second coming of Jesus Christ?
all right, now as I back into my response, let me just say comment on what Elder McCoy just mentioned there about losing our professionals and a large section of our Black church to the chasing the myth of diversity and integration. And that is the elephant in the room that we don't talk about. But I am not nearly as worried about that as he is, because if we never address it, we won't have to address it. Because after a while, the only conferences we will have is Black conferences there and here. It's almost there now. So that would be a non-issue. That issue will resolve itself in and of itself. Right. The second thing I want to mention is that we ought to factor in light of what he says, the combination of assets in relation to the duplication of assets that now exists. Like, for example, where you have regional conferences and state conferences, it is in my view, financially injurious for you to have two campgrounds. Why does South Atlantic, for example, have to have a campground and Georgia, Cumberland, or the Carolinas when they don't use them for 10 days? One of those conferences could sell their property, divide the assets, free
Well,
up monies,
what?
and then you're talking about dynamite now, or you're talking
Okay.
about brick by brick,
No, you
right?
talking about that?
Right, okay, all right, right. Now, it is more financially feasible for one of them to sell those assets, divide them among themselves, free up dollars, and then they can come together on a calendar whereby each conference maintain and benefit the same campgrounds. When
Wow.
you consider the
Wow.
rangers, when you consider um, the cost output to operate the two facilities, I am trying to suggest ways by which you can actually save mega dollars. That's a prime example. Now, the time would not allow me to go into some other examples, but that's one example where through a combination of assets, you can achieve that goal. Now, on a separate note, we will talk about Adventist Health and their mega millions that they have in the bank, billions now, that if we had a way of influencing the brethren, that they could rechannel just a tithe of that money back into the local communities to help the communities fulfill the mission of the church. When I was in the union committee, in Southern Union, they had millions. Now they have billions. Soon it will be zillions, and it's there not doing anything. And we have dark counties and cities that can be benefited. But that's a different discussion for a different day. But I'm just opening up some avenues by which you guys might think about further exploration.
So, Pastor
In
Vincent,
fact,
Pastor Vincent, what hope though? What hope now? You mentioned
okay.
some great ideas. What hope can you give the listeners now, the leaders, the pastors that are listening, the leaders in the local church? What hope can you give us about this church? We understand that there are challenges that we're facing, and there are some structural changes that need to take place. Give us some hope. What can we do?
Well, my hope is built on nothing, nothing less.
Come on now.
but
Now
Yes.
he's going to
No,
preach.
no.
He's
It,
going to
it,
stop
all right,
going with the dynamite and
but
preach.
in
you know,
reality,
we
in reality, though, Pastor Henry, I have to say that I don't know about Pastor Wade, but you, but you, but you and Pastor Paul represent Adventism's right. That's where it is, and if you all don't bring about the needed change, what is going to happen is exactly what we see with the millennials now. You know why some of them are leaving? This thing is a juggernaut. They know it will never change, and there's little they can do to change it or to influence or to impact change. So, you know what they do? They walk out of the door
Mm.
rather than stay by and try to change a seamlessly hopeless situation. And the answer is that it starts in conversations like this, but people like you who have a vision for change, that's where it starts. But beyond the vision, you have to move to a strategy. And once you devise that strategy, then you get to motivation. And that's where you have to mobilize your congregations for change. That is how it's going to think. But you represent the hope that we're talking about.
yeah, he does, and the young pastors everywhere do. But I'm going to tell you this also. Too often we look to we look for solutions from other people. All right. You talked about the campground consolidation. How about in our urban areas where we have multiple churches? Why is everybody building a family life center? Why? Why
That's
not?
another example. That's
Why
another
not?
example.
Why don't pool your resources and let's have one Adventist community center, or large enough to accommodate everybody and big enough so that when the Federation comes to town, you don't have to rent somebody else's facility. Okay? You can start there. But Henry and Paul, in order to make change that I think you would like to see, you're going to have to be willing to sacrifice the perception of upward mobility. Because the first thing that's going to come to you with every controversial program that I ever thought of, the first thing that came out of senior pastors' minds was, McCoy, you're going to hurt your upward mobility. We had a big battle in 1985 at the General Conference, and some of us young pastors took on Neil Wilson and that juggernaut. And we came out of that battle semi-victorious. In fact, there was a fella, I will never forget this fella, he could string together some words. A fella down in the Caribbean named Gadsby. And that boy could talk pretty. I mean,
S.L. Gatsby, I know him. He's dead now, but
the Black Americans and the Caribbeans were on the same page. We were fighting that whole thing, and we were able to beat back that which the brethren were trying to do. And Neil Wilson said to the World Church voted it down. And Neil Wilson said, well, just give me the opportunity to pilot it in North America. Mm-hmm. You understand? And as soon as that General Conference was over, it became law. What I'm trying, and when we came out of that meeting, it was Kibble, me, Greg Allen, Walter Ortiz, and we made the presidents come out to fight. And I had two senior men, one from the General Conference and another from a local conference, told me in no uncertain terms, McCoy, that was a brave thing you did. You were not wrong, but you have gone as far as you're going to go in this church. Okay? So now I'm telling you, if you guys want to make change, put your upward mobility on the line, and you will get up the road much, much further than you think.
Wow. Wow. Good stuff.
Ouch.
Yeah. Well, that's great counsel, Elder. I think that was going to kind of be my follow-up question to Elder to Dr. Henry's question, and particularly to you, Elder McCoy. I was going to posit that because I don't know that my generation has seen anyone take on the structure in our lifetime like we have seen you do. And I'm not that there might not be others, but it does not coming to mind. And so that was going to be that question. What is it? Not just what changes do we need to make, but no matter, because we're always going to disagree on the little details or have things to say here and there, as we've seen even in this chat on the social media stuff. But how do we go about it? What are the steps that we take to do to make change happen? And so I think you addressed some of that there. I just want to throw that back out there as we get ready to wrap this up. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add as to not just the issue of what changes need to be made, but how do we go about making them?
And I need to jump in quickly and make the point. We talk about finances, because it seems to be a system understanding as opposed to where the money is. I think the money is there. It's just how do we prioritize it?
Well, I do believe, although this is an untested premise, that if the structure would change and the local members of the local congregation saw more mission being fulfilled in their communities, mm-hmm. they would be incentivized to give to a greater degree. Wow. I think part of what is an inhibitor on the part of a lot of the members is they're tired of just putting their money and just seeing where it's not going anywhere. But if they see that this is where the money is actually going, and that they listen, here's what the scripture says: wherever a man's treasure is, that's where his heart is. Says if you put your treasure in a certain spot, your heart will follow your treasure. And if you can convince the members of a local church to put their money right here in this project, their heart will go right into it. But their hearts are not there because their treasure is not. So we have to change the structure, and the dollars will flow. I don't think that it's a matter of priorities like Pastor Wade says. I think that once you change the structure, that the priorities will follow. Now, let me just say this, Pastor Paul, that some pastor somewhere sometime has to have the gall and the guts and the gumption to step out and be the sacrificial lamb, the model. All right. Now, I started out in South Central under Elder Dudley. And a lot of you guys don't really know this, but a lot of what you see in Elder McCoy came out of Elder Dudley. He learned a few of those things from Dudley, because Dudley, in his own way, even though he was a part of the establishment, he was a semi-rebel. And I remember when he used to take funds and put it aside to start new churches down in Mississippi that were just being planted. And he had different methods. And out of that, I think Ella McCoy was able to lead us into new frontiers with the retirement plan. And it's going to take forward thinking like Dudley and McCoy in this generation to bring about these changes, because if you don't do it, then 50 years from now, if you know what Adventism in America is going to look like, one big black church in two conferences.
Wow.
A Hispanic conference in most of our conferences, and 10% of our church is going to be white people. It's headed in that direction now, and the power to change that is in your hands. And maybe one of you need to step out, model it, and then probably some of the other younger pastors will follow you.
Let me throw this in. I certainly want to give due respect to Elder Dudley, but I came into the ministry with two principles taught to me by my parents. Number one, get your own answers, and number two, get your own stuff. Okay? Now, the Lord blessed me to be a part, start my ministry in a conference where Dudley was the president. I had one of my uncles who was one of the biggest contractors in the state of California, building contractor. And he told my oldest cousin, when they were talking to me about what I was going to do in the ministry, my uncle told my cousin, he said, we better keep a job available for Joseph, because he's not going to make it in the church. Okay? All right? But a lot of, and I don't want to take too much credit, but I do want to kick my credentials a bit. There are a lot of things that I taught Elder Dudley.
Well, he learned well.
He was in a position to make happen. And as president of the conference, he got the credit for it, which he should have. But what the point I'm trying to make is the Lord placed me under the direction of a man that would allow whatever I had to say to be heard and to be implemented if it had worth and value. All of us are not privileged to have that. But I'm going to tell the young guys, in order to get that, you have to stand up for that.
Amen. And be a sacrificial lamb, because in the present structure now, if you don't have the right president, and like a Dudley who will listen and be supportive, if he interprets your action as being rogue or rebellious, what does he do? He will bust your hips down to a 50-member church
My Lord.
and try to actually be vindictive because you're not a team player and so forth, because you are an architect for change. And so as the movement for change begins, it can't be just you, but you got to have a concentric circle of support in order to make this happen.
Wow, wow. Well, let me just say this. As we wind down, we've had a good conversation today.
Wow.
I think it was more of a challenge. We came up with some questions, how to make it through COVID-19 financially, but it kind of, you kind of broadened it a little bit more and talked about how we can actually thrive as a church. And what I want to say in conclusion, as we just give our summary remarks, is that I think that what I've learned from this show is that we just need to be forward thinkers. We need to recognize that what we have presently does not always have to be.
That's right.
And if we have that vision that God has given the vision to us as leaders in the church and leaders as pastors, I think we can get this thing done. The hope that I would give to our listeners is that, listen, God has placed us here for such a time as this. And when I say us, I'm talking about the people that are listening.
That's right.
God has placed you to be, whether you are the leader, a first elder, which is a leader, or a head deaconess, which is a leader, a pastor, which is a leader. God has placed you at that position for such a time as this to finish the work. And I believe that as we take these experiences from these great men of God, that we can go forward and finish the work.
Well, if I may, I would like to quote one of my very dear friends, Trevor Baker, who was a youth director, conference secretary, president for Northeastern. He told me about a situation where he made a statement at a union session where the growth of the union, all of the soul winning goals of the union were achieved in his conference. And he stood up on the floor of that convention, a union session, and he said, after he made the comparison that the union president was not giving any credit to the Northeastern Conference, when he looked at the program, he said to the assembled group and to that president, he said, looks like the Northeastern Conference is trying to finish the work, and everybody else in this union have finished working.
That's for you, Derek.
what I mean, the objective is to finish the work. We say it, but that requires work. There's no magic to that. I mean, it's hard, but that's what we have all been called for. And I think you guys ought to cry out for every ordained minister having a church to pastor. I don't care what his position is.
Yes. Listen, we are so excited.
That's an additional conversation, and
Yes.
I hope that you will invite me back for that. I would like to.
We may have to bring you on staff, Dr.
Yeah, we need to have a show called Vincent's Corner.
No, and I say that because as I travel around to churches now, the average age in the congregation is 59 or 60 years of age. And we are aging into irrelevance. And there has to be a change in terms of modus operandi in our churches if they are going to survive. And that's why I have an interest.
That is right. You are so right. But I want to say we have a comment up there that there is change. Change is coming, and if we don't get on the train for change, we are going to miss the ride. And so today we just want to thank you, Dr. Vincent, Elder McCoy. The years of experience that you bring to this discussion are numberless. The experience I'm talking about, not the years. The experience, numberless. And we are just so happy that you joined us. We want those who have been listening to us and commenting to us on social media. We will go through every comment. We will respond. We will interact you on there. Let's continue this conversation on social media. Let's not let it die here. Let's continue to educate each other, lifting each other up as we move to get on this train of change. Anselm, tell us what's on docket for next week.
All right.
Anselm,
yes.
Before you get to that question, is there a way that you can make sure that Elder McCoy and I get these questions just so we can kind of maybe even discuss them among ourselves? Because I'd like to have a follow-up a conversation with him about this. Is this available or not?
Yeah, we need to get you a Facebook account, Elder, so you can
you can be relevant. You can be relevant.
All right.
We need that structure to change, so you have a way to do that. But what we can do is, and I'm actually was laughing, but seriously, if you want to interact with some of the questions, that's going to be one of the good ways to do that. What we've been doing is we've been streaming both on Facebook and on YouTube, so we're getting questions and comments that are coming on both platforms. So we'll talk afterwards, and we'll see if we can get a way to get you a way to be able to interact, because we've had some fascinating questions, lots of great input along the way, that I think it will inform us and how we address the issue, because we've had pastors that have been commenting. We had Dr. Pollard, administrator, commenting. We have people in the pews that are commenting and engaging in this conversation. And to what was said, we got to do this again, gentlemen. This is not a topic that's a one and done. We'll be back with this. So yeah, we'll work on that. But for next week, we want you guys to know you can follow the Pastors Roundtable page on Facebook. You can look that up. There's the Pastors Roundtable page. There is also the Pastors Roundtable YouTube channel that we'd like for you to subscribe to and to follow, as you'll be able to get some information and go back and watch some of those things there. Next week we're dealing with Adventist Church and mental health. Right. The impact that COVID-19 has had on that. We have with us Miss Doctor. Yes, Tiffany Llewellyn is going to be with us next week. We just watched a thing she and some other young ladies did last week. Powerful stuff. So Dr. Llewellyn is going to be with us. And then we also have with us Gary, give me that last name. Gary Graham. Gary Graham is going to be with us next week as we talk about the impact that COVID-19 has had and is having on the church and some of our families and just the society at large. So you don't want to miss that. We've got some other great lineups that are coming up. We're going to be talking about the impact it's had on our educational system and finances. So just stay tuned. Watch the page. You'll get some information as it's going on. And thank you again so much to our guests. Yes.
May I say one more thing?
Please.
I have listened. In fact, I missed his second message. But Michael Kelly has had a two-part series. The last one was today, called Black to Death. BLACK, Black to Death. And I forget his title last week, but I couldn't get the rest of it today. But I'm going to go back and listen to it. I would suggest that you guys check that out because that boy was all over it.
I'm on it. We're on it. We're going to check it out. Good stuff.
And
Good stuff.
he's on YouTube. It's on YouTube.
Okay. All right. Thank you again so much to Dr. Vincent, Elder McCoy. Awesome,
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much for your contribution, not just today, but throughout your ministry.
Yes.
The church has been benefited and edified through your ministry. Thank you so very much. To our audience, we're going to see you guys on next week. Make sure you don't miss it. Bring somebody with you. Invite them. Share it. Reshare this broadcast for people who want to catch up on where we are. God bless.
Before
Yes.
we leave, we just want to make sure Dr. McCoy and Dr. Vincent, are you okay to sharing your contact information? See, our listeners would want to connect with you. If you are, we would like to do that in our chat so that they can pick up on it and connect with you one-on-one to engage you if you would like that. We would love to have you continue this conversation, even in your own influence.
Sure.
Yes, I would welcome that, and I have a free box of dynamite to anybody that calls.
You're the dynamite preacher. All right.
You're blowing up stuff.
Feel free to give my contact information.
Yeah, feel free.
No, and I don't know which email address I use, but
Well, we'll get it from you, and I'll put it in there.
conference one is the one I.
Okay.
Regional retirement one is the one I prefer.
Okay.
I'm honored, brethren. Thank you so much for the privilege.
Yeah, and again, thank you all so much. I mean, the thing that you said here really challenged us, and I know it challenged the listeners so that we can be an agent of change. So we praise God for your contribution. And we thank you so much for being on this show.
I'm just amazed that Patrick Vincent and I are on the same page.
On something. All right, guys. Hey, our outro music is on its 5th go round, so we're out, everybody.
All right.
All right.